The Ukrainian offensive hasn't been what either Ukraine or its Western allies hoped it would be, but that doesn't mean it's a failure. Far from it. Ukraine's been scoring very important victories as it sets the stage for the continuation of the war to repel the Russian invaders. But Russia too has proven it can be surprisingly adaptable when it's forced to. Before we discuss how both sides have adapted to the larger war, it's important to understand the current state of the offensive. As of the making of this video, Ukraine has broken through the first two and toughest Russian lines of defense in the Zaporizhia region. By all accounts, Ukraine is preparing to break through the third line of defense, and with Russian defenses getting weaker the deeper Ukraine pushes, a breakthrough might come sooner rather than later. But this hasn't been an easy campaign. In contrast with the last fall's counteroffensive, the current Ukrainian offensive has been a grinding affair that's come at a high cost to both sides, though notably it has been confirmed that Russia's losing 3 times as many personnel and vehicles as Ukraine, despite being on the defensive. This doesn't speak well for the fate of the Russian military once the defensive lines are broken. Typically, the attacker is expected to be leading casualties, not the defender, and especially not when the defender is sitting behind some of the strongest fortifications since World War I. Ukraine has defied its Western advisors, and rather than concentrate its forces on 1 or 2 major axes of attack, it's chosen to continue to pressure the entire Russian front. This is likely because Ukrainian commanders realize that they're outnumbered by Russian forces, and to prevent catastrophic counterattacks by the Russians, they have to maintain pressure everywhere on the front line. While Russia retaking large parts of recently liberated territory would in no way affect the course of the war, it would be a propaganda victory, and Ukraine can't afford to look like it's losing in the eyes of its Western supporters. After all, ask a random person in your life how Ukraine is faring, and you'll see how sadly uninformed most Westerners are on the current state of the war. Further, there's a significant strategic merit in Ukraine's decision not to concentrate its forces into one powerful attack. Russia famously put together mobile reserves of its best troops with the specific job of responding to the sighting of Western tanks, with the goal of destroying them and scoring a major propaganda victory. Ukraine's denied Russia the opportunity to do so and tied up the Russian mobile reserves by leaving them guessing as to where or even if Ukraine will launch a concentrated attack of Western Leopards and Abrams. As the conflict has evolved, though, both sides have learned some very painful lessons and begun to adapt how they approach the war. Early into Ukrainian attacks, Russia found it had made a critical error due to the influx of Western mine-clearing vehicles equipped with Miklik mine-clearing explosive charges. Russia realized their minefields were too shallow. Ukraine's Western-supplied Miklik vehicles were able to quickly clear paths through the minefields with a single charge, allowing Ukrainian troops to quickly exploit openings. To resolve this, Russia began to expand their minefields to over 500 meters in depth, thus preventing a single mine-clearing vehicle from blasting a hole all the way through the field. This has had the effect of slowing down Ukrainian assaults, but it also had an impact on the quality of minefields Russia's been able to create. Expanding the width of their minefields meant using more mines, and Russia is quickly running out of mines held in stockpiles. This has made newer minefields less dangerous to Ukrainian attackers, though simply knowing you're standing in an active minefield has a significant psychological effect all on its own. A lack of an anti-vehicle mine and Western vehicles' resiliency to landmines has led to the Russians stacking multiple mines together or coupling them with improvised explosive devices. This has further depleted the total available mines, a significant problem as Ukraine begins to clear paths for penetration attacks into Russian defenses. In response to Ukrainian breakthroughs, the Russians had originally prepared to deliver fixed artillery fire directly into their own trenches. One would hope that would be after the defenders had retreated or been defeated, but given Russia's love affair with friendly fire, one can't be too sure. While this tactic was effective in scoring losses amongst exhausted Ukrainian attackers, Russia very quickly realized it was coming with a cost they couldn't bear. The reason Russia was forced to abandon this tactic has to do with a change in Ukrainian doctrine itself. Normally, when on the offensive, artillery is used to soften up enemy defenders and pin down any attempt to reinforce them. However, Ukraine began to stop supporting their attacks with artillery and instead held it in reserve until the Russian guns opened up. Once they did, Ukraine used an influx of Western counter-battery radars and precision munitions to devastate Russian artillery. The situation got so bad that Russian troops took to complaining about it on social media. Russian General Ivan Popov was famously fired after publicly complaining about casualties inflicted by Ukrainian counter-battery fire and the lack of counter-battery fire from the Russian side. When Russia began to shell its own positions as they were being overrun, Ukraine jumped on the opportunity to in turn devastate Russian guns. The tactic proved so costly to the Russians that they were forced to abandon it altogether, and now instead Russia's using demolition charges to destroy its trenches when under the threat of being seized. This is significantly less effective than utilizing artillery to harass and destroy an attacking enemy foe, but it has worked to deny Ukrainian attackers strong defensive positions. This isn't the only way that the use of artillery is changing, however. In the wake of Ukraine's offensive and a collapsing reserve of ammunition, Russia has completely reshaped its artillery doctrine. Before this, Russia stood by a doctrine established in the wake of World War II, where it was estimated that 720 rounds needed to be fired to pin down a platoon-sized force. However, as the war has dragged on, Russia is now incapable of sustaining such huge expense in shells. And to make matters worse, its over-reliance on artillery has led to gun barrels wearing out at an alarming rate. Lack of ammunition and worn-out gun barrels have taken a toll on Russian fires, but this has only been compounded by the use of precision weapons by the Ukrainians. Now, undertaking traditional fire missions simply takes too long and makes artillery vulnerable to enemy counter-battery fire. This is something the West is already aware of, which is why the United States places a premium on air power and precision strike abilities. Precision artillery rounds can deliver pinpoint destruction with a far greater effect in far less time than a blanket firing of dumb rounds. This allows the U.S. artillery to be far more survivable in a counter-battery environment and have a greater effect. Russia's learned this lesson in the most painful way possible, and now Russia started to focus on developing laser-guided precision shells over traditional dumb shells. Whether Russia can meet the economic challenge of producing expensive precision shells in vast quantities remains to be seen. Meanwhile, the artillery advantage Russia has long enjoyed is rapidly eroding in the face of precision Ukrainian fires. Unlike Russian artillery, Ukraine can only fire its guns for 2 to 15-minute fire missions, depending on the distance from the front and the caliber involved, achieving the same effect with far more survivability. On both sides, the war has shifted from large unit actions to small unit actions, with assaults conducted at the company level rather than the battalion or division level. This is a major departure from the way many saw this war going, and a lot more similar to the way wars like World War II were fought. For Ukraine, its need to apply pressure across the entire front necessitates smaller unit actions, and it's found that smaller assault forces are less vulnerable to superior Russian air power and artillery numbers. However, both sides are finding it difficult to coordinate large unit actions. Russia lacks the communications, NCO corps, and even junior officers needed to conduct large-scale maneuvers. Ukraine has a similar problem in one regard: it's running into a significant shortage of support staff. While Ukraine's managed to raise a very large army, it lacks support staff for new units being formed, including logistics, intelligence, and training sections for each individual unit. What Ukraine badly needs is Western-trained staff to complement the large formations it's conscripted. Ironically, both nations face a similar problem here. Ukraine because it was caught unprepared for a massive invasion, and Russia really has no excuse, except its military is a live dumpster fire. Russia does retain a mass advantage, though. It simply has more personnel and vehicles, and it's leveraging that advantage against Ukraine's offensive. At the start of the war, Russia really believed it was a modern combined arms army, but first contact with determined Ukrainian defenders proved this wasn't the case at all. Instead, Russia's resorted to the age-old Russian way of war: mass attritional warfare. If Russia can't outsmart or outfight you, and it can't, it'll simply leverage its huge numbers and astronomical tolerance for casualties to simply outkill you. And it makes a sick sort of sense. Russia has over 3 times the population of Ukraine. In another cold-blooded move, Russia's adopted the strategy of simply sacrificing its tanks to inflict disproportionate losses on Ukrainian attackers. When under attack, Russia will surge 1 to 3 tanks forward to engage the Ukrainian attackers. Inevitably, these tanks are destroyed, but because of the limited maneuverability of Ukrainian vehicles inside of minefields, Russian tanks often manage to score disproportionate losses on the Ukrainian forces before being destroyed. It's this type of warfare that the West could never tolerate, but one that Russia's employed for its entire history of brutal attritional war. Here, though, the advantage of Western vehicles truly shines. We're now in a position to begin to sift through the results of Ukraine's offensive actions all the way through to August, and one picture has become crystal clear. Western vehicles are superior to anything in Russian or Ukrainian stocks. We aren't specifically talking about firepower or capability, though. These are already known data points. We're talking about crew survivability. According to one Ukrainian report, despite the loss of 11 American Bradleys throughout the course of several engagements, the Ukrainians reported 0 crew deaths. Meanwhile, losses inside of their old Soviet vehicles continue to mount, with the Russians suffering the same fate. More importantly, Western vehicles are overwhelmingly suffering mobility kills rather than outright destruction, and often due to mines rather than direct engagement by Russian forces. This means that Western vehicles can and have been recovered, where they can be sent back to the rear or to Poland for repairs and then put back in the fight. The survival of the crew is even more important though, as it allows Ukraine to continue to build a core of veteran soldiers while Russia circles the drain in the infamous death spiral that follows the continued death of veterans and new conscripts alike before they can reach veteran status. For now, Russia's lack of veterans is mitigated by the fact that it's fighting a defensive war, but once Ukraine secures breaches through Russian defenses, its lack of veteran troops will be a catastrophic blow to its ability to prosecute this war. Another discovery from the ongoing offensive is serious deficiencies in NATO training of Ukrainian troops. In the West, troops are expected to master individual skills before partaking in larger unit drills. This is because of a focus on safety, as training at the company plus level often involves live fire exercises that can go seriously wrong if individual soldiers are not well trained and competent. NATO's concern for safety, though, is hampering Ukrainian training. Investigation into NATO training courses show the alliance is putting entirely too much focus on individual skills, limiting the amount of time the Ukrainian units have to participate in the type of company plus training actions they'll have to undertake on the battlefield. This is leading to a deficiency in training in large-scale unit tactics for both the grunt on the ground and Ukrainian commanders. NATO trainers are thus being encouraged to accept a level of risk in their training programs that would normally be unacceptable for peacetime Western armies, as the current status quo is simply shifting the risk from training to a live battlefield. Advisors recommend that NATO focus on company plus training and allow the Ukrainian military to focus on individual soldier skills. This lack of training in company plus actions directly leads to a lack of confidence in Ukrainian commanders in their own units, with very real battlefield effects. It was observed that Ukrainian artillery only fired smoke 3% of the time, a dramatic departure from the Western doctrine of using heavy smoke screens laid down by artillery to hide assaults or confuse an enemy's attack. Despite smoke being effective in select battles Ukraine has engaged in, Ukrainian commanders are overwhelmingly unwilling to utilize it for one simple reason: it obscures their line of sight on the battlefield. Ukrainian commanders are quarterbacking the fight via live drone feeds and the like, which allows them to keep an eye on the battlefield and rapidly respond to enemy action. However, this is inherently a poor way to manage a military, as while it can be helpful, it also creates significant vulnerabilities when live feeds are disrupted and units are left waiting for orders. Hence, the focus on personal initiative in Western militaries, though they enjoy a far greater degree of training and thus confidence in individual units to get the job done properly and adapt to an enemy's own actions. Ukraine lacks such confidence, and it's understandable. It has only recently begun to adopt a Western way of war after decades of Soviet-style top-down doctrine. This is a problem that won't be easily solved, and it's likely not to be solved before the war is over, as it requires a fundamental retraining of the entire military, senior staff included. If there is a silver lining, though, it's that Russian forces are suffering the same fate, so at least the playing field is level. One more important adaptation witnessed on the Russian side is a dramatically improved ability to coordinate orderly withdrawals. Last fall, the world witnessed some of Russia's best fighting forces retreat in disorganized routes, but this has not been happening this year. Instead, Russian forces have been observed conducting orderly fighting retreats, giving up ground to Ukrainian attackers without routing. This has substantially decreased the casualties Russia takes on the defense and made it much harder for Ukraine to exploit Russian defeats, proof that even Russia can evolve when the pressure is high enough. Unfortunately, Russia's ability to coordinate at a large scale is still insufficient, and we've seen zero evidence that it's able to exploit failed Ukrainian assaults with counterattacks of its own. The only counterattacks Russia has launched have been slow to coordinate and turned into the same attritional slugfest that Ukraine has been forced to endure. Even more painful for Russia, its ability to coordinate its own air forces with its air defense continues to be a point of significant failure. As of the making of this video, Russia has shot down yet another one of its own fighters. The West has identified a lack of mobile air defenses for the front lines as a critical need for future offensives, and with the arrival of F-16 soon, Russia is going to face even greater pressure to deconflict its own aircraft from friendly air defenses, something it has proven to be incredibly incompetent at doing. With the air environment looking to get significantly more complicated, Russia may find its ability to safely launch sorties compromised. Now go check out why Ukraine's counteroffensive is having trouble versus Russia, or click this other video instead.